Hey docs, in this episode of the Chiro Factor, we did things a little bit differently. Some of it's comedy, some of it is straight gold. And what we did is we actually just took the questions from our audience when we hosted our seminar called The Best Practices. Now, the Best Practices seminar is obviously very different than this podcast, the Chiro Factor, but the two definitely blend together, because if you like what you've been listening here, then you should get yourself to the Best Practices seminar. But on this particular episode of the Chiro Factor, we just took questions from docs in the audience at our London event. So our London seminar had doctors from, I think the final count was like 14 different countries. And you'll see that in this video. The docs just say their name quickly, what country they're from, and they ask their question. And then James and I each take a turn, kind of a volley at the answers. But the content is gold because it's the genius of the doctors and the fortitude of their years in practice combined with their wisdom of seeing patients that really gave us some powerful questions that we could pull apart, unpack, and deliver for you this episode of high quality content. Listen, as of now, we are going to do our last Best Practices seminar in Australia, and we're kind of sitting down looking at a calendar just to see when we can do this again in North America, in Australia, possibly in Europe. And what you can do for us is comment down below in this video the encouragement to go, that you love the positivity. The more comments we get, the more likely I am to get James Chestnut to agree to travel and do the Best Practices seminar. So this one's up to you, and this is what we would call a freemium. The podcasts are free, but like anything, a little exchange is greatly appreciated. The more comments we get on this particular video, the better it is for James, and the more likely it is for us to get back on the road and do this for round 2. And if you were there for round 1, you know how powerful the Best Practices seminar was combined with this podcast. We're hoping to help you as chiropractors have the best year in 2025. Hey everyone, thanks for the support. Please comment down below, and if you click the notifications button here on YouTube, you'll get the notices when these podcasts drop. But I'd really like to convince James to get back on the road to do the Best Practices seminar, and we need your help. Hey, thanks for everything. I appreciate the support. We'll see you soon. Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of the Chiro Factor. We are in London. We're actually doing a seminar here where we've done a count. We have docs from 11 different countries, and what we're going to do is field some questions from the docs and get through as many as possible. We know there's many factors in health, but one of the X factors that always seems to be the difference maker, as you know, is the Chiro Factor. So we're going to jump over to Mark. Mark practices in Germany. So tell us where you practice and what is your question?
Yes. Hello. I have an office in Stuttgart, Germany. Some people might be familiar, others might not be, close to Frankfurt. And yeah, my question really is, since much of the research is only now validating chiropractic's foundational principles, how do you balance clinical experience and best available research in the context of patient education or even in discussions with colleagues?
Fuck, if we're going to have questions like this all day, it's going to be
fucking Germans, eh?
Anybody else want to go first? Is this vodka? Because it would help if it was.
Do we have any French in the room? We'd like a little more.
I'll lead off here. For fuck's sake. Let's start over. James, you go first.
Well, I think that you never leave out clinical evidence. Or pardon me, clinical experience, because that's the most important part. But your clinical experience is really about what you do with an individual patient, not what the literature says. The literature is going to give you this foundation of what you can generally expect, because no evidence tells you what an individual patient will how they will respond. That's not what literature does. It gives you averages. So if we know the averages, as an example, we know that Haas says the literature says half. After 12 visits, half will be about half better. But there's a big range of that. If you look at the data, the individual patient data, even in that study, there'll be a big range. Some of those patients were 80% better, and some of them were 10% better. And so that's where clinical experience comes in. And then, there's some things that you might just, like Brad's talking about, like how you touch a patient, some of the words you say to the patient. There's a lot of things that make a difference in someone getting better, whether they're doing the omega-3 and D, are they exercising at home, are they drinking water? So these are all the clinical experience things, I think, and you never take that out, because at the end of the day, it's your license and it's your responsibility to treat that patient as an individual and respond to that patient's needs and tailor care to how they're responding, but you still use that evidence as a basis, a starting line. Does that make sense in terms of a care recommendation? You give that recommendation, we're going to start with 12, and then we're going to see how you go. And then that's where your experience comes in.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, and I would say, just to kind of add to that, knowing what the baseline is and then making it individual, it kind of becomes a jumping in point, right? Like, this is the law of averages. However, everybody's an individual. And what I know from working with pro athletes is a lot of times the science and the research is late to catch up with what your clinical experience is. What I'll share tomorrow at the Best Practice Seminar is a clip from Andrew Huberman. For the audience, raise your hand if you listen to the Huberman podcast. Raise your hand. Wave at the camera just so they know that's a pretty popular podcast. I think he's top 5 right now in the world. And one of the things he said with a guy named Tim Ferriss, who wrote the 4-Hour Workweek, highly efficient guy, is that a lot of times the athletes, the coaches, the performers figure out what's working, and then it becomes popular, and then the scientists want to investigate it and see why it works. So what those two will say in this video I'll share tomorrow is actually a lot of times what Ferriss likes to do is talk to the coaches and the performers, because if they're getting results, then they'll research it, they'll do the science, they'll do the study, and 5 to 7 years later, and Huberman kind of interrupts him, he goes, if that would be quick. 5 to 7 years later, we'll get the published research as to why this works. So to summarize that, my experience is consistent on the clinical side. James is the research side. The athletes know what works. The athletes are already doing the things that are good, and the science will catch up. And 2 top scientists will tell you in this podcast, science is slow to catch up with the clinical experience when it comes to high-level performance. And that has absolutely been my experience. We've had patients who've done cryotherapy and jumped in cold tanks for years, and now all of a sudden they're like, did you know that activates brown fat in the adipose tissue and whatever else? And that's just one example, but it's like, yeah, that's how it works.
I think a good way to say that is the performers, the clinicians, the athletes, 'cause that's certainly true when I was doing exercise physiology, right? Like the guys in the gym, they knew what worked, right? And then we came along later. Basically, that's how it worked. But the guys who are on the front lines, the guys who are living life, they know what works, and then the science comes around later and says how it works.
Yeah,
we're not even telling you what works really in the science. To be truthful, we're trying to figure out why it works.
Yeah, and what I like is the science then will catch up with us, the practitioners. And in chiropractic, that's really common, right? Like, we know it works first, and then later they'll fill in with this stuff. But this is where I think a philosophy over the science is great, because you have a belief and a thought process that assimilates the information, as opposed to blindly following the science. Well, we'd all be behind the curve waiting 10 years to get the research out to do the things we inherently know work. And so for me, there's got to be a healthy blend of those two things. But certainly just saying you're science only, or I wait for the publication because I'm in practice, I go, I don't think that's the best results for the patient. Do what's going to help them. You're allowed to make those individual, customized, unique decisions we talked about today, and the science will catch up. And by a show of hands, how many of you feel really good to hear the science will catch up with you? You don't have to wait for the science. Raise your hand if that makes you feel better. Yeah, cool. Because that's chiropractic 101, at least from a philosophical standpoint.
And the way to use clinical science is that what the Haas study, I just keep using it as an example because it's just so important for us, right? Which is to say, for sure they're going to need 12.
Yeah.
Right? So that's just a great starting point. Like, you need 12. Do I need 24? Maybe. You might need 30. You might need 18. I don't know. But I know you need 12. There's no one who's going to get 100% better in 12, right? It's just almost unheard of. So that's a great starting point. Then you kick in with your clinical experience for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you for not asking a second question, Mark. I really appreciate it. Give me a round of applause. Thanks for coming to the mic. Kate Slade from Ireland. Kate Slade, come on up. And just so you know, if you do come to the mic, you will be partially abused, okay? That's how that's going to work. So good luck. Kate, thank you for coming to the mic. Put your hands together for Kate. Rock and roll. You have to.
So my question was, it's a bit repetitive now in the last one, but what is the recommended dose for an average person starting out in chiropractic care, and if there's evidence that people need it for their lifetime?
Well, again, the evidence that they need it for their lifetime, there's no studies that have looked at people who've got lifetime care versus those who haven't. Those studies, and they'll never be done. It's too expensive. There's no way we're going to get a longitudinal study like that. So I think, again, clinical experience is really logic, right? And it's like, is there a reasonable is it a reasonable assumption based on the available science to say that if joints stop moving when they don't go through full range of motion, if humans sit 32 years of their life on average, right, and they're not moving regularly, if most people have a desk job, and we know that the scar tissue adhesions occur quite rapidly, does it make sense that those people need some kind of maintenance care or wellness care for a lifetime? It's absolutely logical. If you say to a patient, the research says you absolutely need this or you're going to drop dead, that's not ethical, right? Or logical. But if you say, you know what, and again, this is where experience comes in. What we notice is that people who do this regularly, they do better. They have less relapses. They tend to have a better quality of life and more comfort every day. And so I think that's important. But again, will we ever get a study, with enough statistical power and enough patients that they follow them for a lifetime? I wouldn't hold your breath on that one.
Yeah. What I love that Ross McDonald's doing at the Scotland College of Chiropractic is incorporating research early on. He's got Alice Kate up there. Funding is a big part of the research. And so certainly a longitudinal study like that is massively expensive. But I also like to give examples for patients, Kate, that I think will help them out. And something docs can do listening to this is what a patient education tool that I use, I call it a brain tattoo. In other words, I can teach them something once and it's like a tattoo, which is permanent. And a good example would be like ligamentous creep. Or disc imbibition. And so basically the way that works is the start of the day, you're taller at the start of the day, you have more water in the disc. And if we were to measure you at the end of the day, from sitting in particular forces more water out of the disc, in particular the lower back, and then you're shorter at the end of the day. So a good patient education tool you can use for your patients that drive to work is I do the rear view mirror. And basically I say, listen, when you sit in the car in the morning, you have your rear view mirror set at a certain height because you're taller, you need to set that angle. After sitting and typing at a keyboard or whatever most people do, 32 years of sitting, then you push the water out, you actually get a little shorter. So now when you're shorter in the car, nobody's been in your car at the end of a workday, but you have to readjust your mirror. And so what I tell patients and what everybody here can do is say, listen, start of the day, you have your rear view mirror set. At the end of the day, the reason you need to readjust it, and every time you readjust it, I want you to think about your chiropractic appointment because the water in the disc has thinned out. You've actually gotten shorter. And on a long enough timeline, longitudinally, it makes sense logically that actually you're going to break down the disc. You're going to start to degenerate unless we do something to put water back in the disc. Sleeping does that. But so does the adjustment. And the imbibition is actually the water pulling back into the proteins of the disc and it rehydrates the disc. So unless you're doing something to counteract gravity, then basically this is going to be something that happens on a consistent basis. Every time you readjust your rear view mirror, I want you to think about when was the last time you got your adjustment. At each red light, I want you to think about your posture, pull your chin in, pull your shoulders back. Some patients, I say, do you even know you have a back to your car seat? Like, do you lean into the back of the chair? So every red light, I want you to notice your posture. By show of hands for the audience, raise your hand if you can do this next week in your practice. 2 brain tattoos, right? 1 brain tattoo, the rear view mirror. The other brain tattoo, every red light you sit up, right? If they're taking a train, you're fucked. No, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, we'll figure something else out for a brain tattoo. But for commuters that drive, that's a really big thing. And I have patients who come in years later and they go, I always think about you when I do the rear view mirror. And I always think about at the red light what my posture is. And I pull my chin in and I go, well, then why did it take you 4 years to get back into the practice, right? Like we have patients that drop out too. But these brain tattoos can be little micro triggers that get people back into your practice. And essentially, they're going to need chiropractic care for life. Right? And this idea of, is there longitudinal evidence? No, but I think if you make it a rational, reasonable argument, people will get on board with that.
And especially when you tell them the only way you'll know is if you do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And just like, what we find is the patients who go away, they feel worse and they all end up coming back. You'll come back on your own terms, but you'll be back.
Yeah.
And the one I used to do was the head against the headrest. Because I'd only say, if you get in an accident and your head's not against the headrest, it's way worse. People come in and go, I can't get my head back.
Right.
I'm like, oh. And then they get adjusted for a while, and they can, but they literally can't get their back of their head against the chair unless they're looking up and they can't see out the windshield.
The forward head posture is so bad, right? So twice they do morning and evening, they do a brain tattoo and they remember because the rearview mirror, and then every red light, which is like multiple times. If you do this right, at some point in the week, they're going to be thinking of you. And I have patients that go, you've cursed me. I think of you at every red light. And it's like, it's a great practice building tool. So that is Kate Slade from Ireland. Give her a round of applause. All right, Jeremiah Mosier.
You guys already answered my question from round one.
Just get up here and ask the question anyway. Where's Roberta? I'm just going to torture her. She doesn't want to come to the mic. All right, go ahead. This is Jeremiah. You are from San Marino. First of all, let's explain where San Marino is.
San Marino, it is warm. It's a small country in Italy. It's about 40,000 people, fifth smallest country in the world. It's a beautiful little place.
Right on.
Yeah.
Hey, wait a minute. How can it be a small country in Italy?
It is within the borders of Italy, but it's an independent nation.
Are you serious?
Yeah. There's Vatican City.
Yeah, because that's
and there's
small, too.
San Marino.
Is it
Yep.
smaller than Vatican City?
No,
Oh,
it's bigger than
okay.
Vatican
Okay.
City. Yeah.
Wow.
45.
And is it an island or just a
No,
region?
it's just a landlocked region.
Wow.
Yeah, beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah. Listen, tomorrow for the seminar, if you can cover those arms, that would be appreciated.
Yeah. no one needs that.
Rule tomorrow, long sleeve shirts only. Guys got arms like legs. Just get on with the question already. It's getting annoying over
Yeah,
here.
can we get a jacket over here?
They have gyms in San Marino? What the hell? Go ahead with your question, bro.
All right. So you guys basically answered it from round one, but
I know, but we just want to abuse you. So.
Sure, love it. How to navigate when our personal experience may differ from the research presented. For example, these two medical doctors you referenced that were doing lumbar treatments over the course of a year, and they continued with two of the groups and adjusted some for a period and stopped and continued. And their claim was that the ones they stopped returned back to baseline. Okay.
Or near baseline.
Or near baseline.
And again, when they say that, that's average, not all.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So some
Okay.
wouldn't have,
Okay.
some would have.
Okay, so, I mean, where I'm at, I have seen a lot of patients over the last 8-9 years. And some I haven't seen. I saw another last week, and I haven't seen him for 5 years. And he came, he sent me his whole family, his whole extended family, great guy. And he comes, hey, doc, I still feel fantastic from 5 years ago. He didn't turn back to baseline, and a number of others the same. So, you know.
Can't have him in a small country.
Can't have him there, right?
Dude, he's got to go
Granted-
mafia shit.
Granted, there's less stress in this area than
No, what
than
I'm
others,
saying
but
is, I would say to him, like, I will just wager that he has a good lifestyle outside of that clinic. right?
100%.
And he's probably not sitting at a desk all day, and he's probably out doing something active. And so, great, but he's not average. He's an outlier, and outliers exist, and that's no problem. That has nothing to, like literature doesn't tell us about the outliers. They actually chuck them out, literally, right? And then they go to what the averages are. Like very often they'll literally throw out the outliers from the data. And so you got an outlier, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that the rest of the people don't need it. It doesn't mean anything else. It's like, that's fantastic, but I guarantee you that guy lives a different life than most. Fair?
Here's what
Yes,
I love
definitely,
teaching with
definitely.
Chestnut, and just to pay him a compliment, is he's objective. Like he'll hear something like that and not like try to bend it into the paradigm. He just goes, well, that's an outlier. And I love that. Like ask him questions, and I'm sure the guy lives a phenomenal lifestyle, right? Yoga, outdoor exercise. He's not sitting at a desk. I'm sure the guy doesn't smoke. Like you go through it, and all of a sudden you go, you're actually living a really healthy lifestyle that 99% of people don't. But congrats. Like I don't wish that against somebody. You know what I mean? You want them to be healthy. So it's like, I would just be curious and go, what do you do? How do you do it? Like, is there something you can share? And, you know, if he brings you olive oil and goes, this is magic olive oil, great, I'll take it, you know. But the truth is, they've got
Rub it on your arms.
Yeah, right. It makes them swell. But the idea is you'll find out and be curious. And I think that's also part of science. It's not that it needs to fit in our box or their box, but like, where does it fit? And if it's an outlier, then that's usually what they throw out. But understanding it, and then also to kind of take that a step further, what I've learned from teaching with James is the design study and then really defining the word. So like, what is SMT? And I'm going to tee you up on this a little bit. Do they define a SMT differently, spinal manipulation, based on different studies that are starting to define that differently?
Yeah, they've now.
Can you talk about the danger of that?
Yeah, the danger is they're now pooling all these studies on these systematic reviews, and you'll hear, well, the systematic reviews show chiropractic's not really better than anything else. It's like got a kind of low level of evidence, and they often downgrade it for all kinds of reasons, which I'll talk about tomorrow. But one of the things they're doing is they've now defined SMT as mobilization or thrust manipulation.
Stop. Say that again, because this is key for everybody.
Okay, so
How do they define it?
in the literature, they've now defined SMT. So there's an SMT study. You'll see it in the title, and it's all mobilizations because they haven't differentiated between thrust SMT and mobilizations. So And of course, Heidi's work and all other kinds of work has shown very clearly that a rapid thrust through that joint is completely different in terms of its force time and its neurophysiological effect on the input into the central nervous system versus a slow mobilization. But now they're labeling these studies SMT. So then what they do is they pool all these mobilization studies, which have very poor results, in with the SMT studies. And then that downgrades that rate. So if you add a bunch of like very low benefit stuff in with a bunch of high benefit stuff, and there's not even a whole bunch of high benefit stuff anymore because most of the studies are 2 to 4 adjustments now, or 2 to 4 manipulations. So then you've got all these studies that they pool together, and the reason they're doing all these systematic reviews is because they know if they pool all these crap studies with the few good ones, they can do 2 things. Number one, they can like the average now benefit of all of those studies goes lower, and then they can also say, well, the results are heterogeneous, meaning that they're not homogeneous, meaning they'll also downgrade it for that. But they don't actually take into account the fact that they're homogeneous because they're different interventions and different amounts of care. So the JADD rating scale for how they rate the methodological quality of a study takes into account. In no way does it take into account the number of adjustments. Right? You could have a very high scoring JADD study that has 1 adjustment over 8 weeks. And then measures again at 1 year and see if and that's where the outcomes are measured. The JADD it's just based on design. Whether was there a control group? Was it double blinded or single blinded? Right. And so it doesn't take that into account at all. It's absolutely diabolical what they're doing.
And important to the future of the profession is they're starting to downgrade the definition of chiropractic adjustments as well. So mobilization, slow mobilization of a joint versus an adjustment, what we would call a manipulation versus a chiropractic scientifically specific adjustment, right? So there's a difference there of manipulating, moving, or adjusting, slow motion versus a thrust.
It's actually mobilization.
Mobilization.
So manipulation by definition goes into the paraphysiological space.
So they're not
That's a
even doing
rapid
that.
thrust. No, they're just doing slow mobilizations.
And
Right.
so what they do then, so there's 2 things here. 1, you might have an outlier. 2 is you're going to start seeing these studies, right, that are getting diluted because they're changing the definition. Right? It's like causation and correlation. When you change the word or you interplay them, all of a sudden it dilutes the good studies for chiropractic. And I only know this because I've heard him say this before. So this is me kind of winding up James. Did you see how fired up he got right there? So is this a very platonic situation, or could this be detrimental over time? On a long enough timeline, could this be good for chiropractic?
No chance. No, and it's deliberate. That's what I want you to understand, is that this is deliberate. They've deliberately downgraded the level of evidence for chiropractic. There's only one systematic review that didn't do that, and that was the Hidalgo study, systematic review. And what he did was he took out, he didn't control for number of adjustments, but he controlled for whether it was a mobilization or thrust manipulation. And when he took out the non-thrust mobilizations and just looked at thrust manipulations, the level of evidence went from mild to moderate to moderate to high, meaning that we're the most evidence-based intervention in the world by far.
My man.
Fantastic.
Right?
Yeah.
In fact, the highest rated study in the history of chiropractic, or SMT, it's not chiropractic, it was SMT. The highest rated SMT study was called the Hancock study. It was out of Australia, and it's rated 8 on the scale of 10 for JADD. It's very, very highly rated. They called it an SMT study. It was done by physical therapists in Australia. 98% of the patients had mobilizations only. But it gets weighted the highest because it's the highest on the JADD scale, and there wasn't a single manipulation or adjustment in it.
Is that ethical, you think, to do that when they're doing this?
No, it's highly. It's no.
Just winding them up, folks. Just doing my job over here. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for your service. Thank you, guys. Big love.
Hey, Chiro Factor, if you're interested in learning to increase the numbers of new patients at your next health talk, then join us for an important workshop. It's called Speak to Attract Believers. You see, it's 2 days in a classroom showing you how to do your traditional lunch and learn lectures where you get more new patients, greater growth, and avoid some mistakes that you probably didn't know you were making. Maybe the best part about this Speak to Attract Believers workshop is it's a hybrid course. You see, once you sign up, you get immediate access online. You can begin the training immediately today. And when you learn to do talks, you can avoid doing screenings and still have exponential growth. Maybe better still is after you do the online training and course material, you also get a seat in the classroom. I'll coach you, train you, and help you write your 10-minute talks so you can do a traditional 60-minute lunch and learn or 10-minute talks. And each time you get new patients and growth. But here's the kicker. There's a bit of an inverse law. When it comes to doing your talks, the less time you need, the more places you can get into. So it's an industry standard now to do 10-minute talks. And when you do that, you can get more marketing events on your calendar and more new patients in. Join us for Speak to Attract Believers. The website is levelupmentoring.rocks. Again, it's not a .com. It's levelupmentoring.rocks.
I just want to make a point on that, because I'm going to guess you come from a very rural area. It's probably not a big city, or is it? Reasonable?
Yeah, we got 300,000.
Okay, that's not bad, but I'm guessing this guy, he does something active. But
Yeah.
I've got a buddy who's working way up north in Canada, but he's actually working, there's a native community way up there, but also up there is like a Mennonite Hutterite community. And he called me and he goes, dude, like we did some work together on some like native reserve stuff. It's a long story, but one day we'll talk about it maybe on the podcast. It was pretty interesting. But anyway, he calls me and he goes, dude, you cannot believe what's happening to me up here. I'm like, what? He flies way up north, and these people come in, and these kids have never had a vaccine. They've never had a drug. All they've eaten is food that they've grown themselves. Right? Like these are almost hunter-gatherers, man, right? And he's like, I can't believe the response. I'm like, dude, you're dealing with health egos. And then he practices in Edmonton, which is, a relatively big city for Canada anyway, right? And he says the difference is like, it's so obvious to me, the difference on how these people are responding. I'm like, yeah, dude, they're all outliers. They're all fast responders.
Right.
Incredible.
Huge.
Yeah.
Major difference.
Yeah,
Right?
major.
Because they're living the lifestyle that you write about in the book, that you
course.
teach at your workshops. It's like they're living it. And those are smaller and smaller populations, but it's an isolated group to have that to tap into.
Yeah. And what a great study group.
Yeah, for sure. So we had, I want to get Christopher up here. Chris McElroy, if you wouldn't mind coming to the mic. Put your hands together for Chris. So full disclosure, I volunteered Chris for this question. Grab that mic if you would, pal. Chris is a chiropractic student. So basically anything goes. I said, I don't care what you ask, just ask something. I want to hear from a chiropractic student's perspective, anything at all.
So my question was basically like, with schools going further away from chiropractic, what advice would you have for students currently in it to sort of get ahead and not fall into the traps, and then when they're associates to like continue going forward?
Love it. So basically, as a chiropractic student, what can chiropractic students do to get ahead?
Yeah.
This is going to be a shameless plug, but I would say, I think before people cross the stage, I ought to hear from James Chestnut. And honestly, you being here today in chiropractic school, what school do you go to?
McTimoney.
Goes to McTimoney. So the idea is AECC is shut down. Have they fully shut down their chiropractic program, or they're in the process of
I
shutting
think
it down?
they changed the name anyway.
They changed the name. They shut it down like 11 years ago. No, they're still been operational. But the truth is, I think for chiropractic students, a lot of times the answer is getting off campus and getting outside the school. And I know that's going to piss some people off. I'm not naming schools. I'm just saying for every student on the road of life, the extra mile, you're never going to have traffic, and you got to get off the campus and get into seminars. And even if you get into practices and you see stuff you dislike, it's helping you form your opinion. If you get into seminars, workshops, and offices that are doing chiropractic care and you do like it, then you can imitate that. But to say that the school is responsible for you being successful in business, I actually disagree with that. They got to get you through to graduation. They're getting you through some kind of boards or qualifications. They're getting you certified. There's over 200 named techniques in chiropractic. So for them to build a business model around all 200 techniques, it's absurd. The truth is, it's up to you. And by saying that, I'm a big fan of this phrase, there are no rich victims in life. Take responsibility. And for many years, I'd have to say I changed my opinion on this. I thought the schools should do a better job. And then I took a step back and I looked at what they were doing. I go, you know what the best answer is? You got to do it yourself. And so whether that's good or bad, I don't know. I don't want to put a label on it. But the docs that do the best are the ones that get involved off campus. And again, this is not a knock at any certain school. But the truth is they have so much going on that I don't think you walk across the stage and you're ready to go most of the situations. So being around it and honestly having the exposure to the things that you're doing today. Chris's father's a phenomenal chiropractor. His mom's in the office, runs it, like a well-oiled machine, and mom and dad in there doing a phenomenal job. So you could sit at your dinner table and get the answers from Brian. But the truth is, to form your own opinions and not form your dad's opinions of chiropractic, I really think it takes being exposed to someone like this, who's going to give you the truth and maybe be a little bit counterintuitive. And then over time, it's going to prove him right. And so the quicker you get in front of the right audience, the right crowd, get into a seminar like Best Practices, you already set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw this back to you before we let James answer. What was one thing that stood out to you today that maybe you could share with chiropractic students listening?
Just the sort of like overwhelming evidence that adjustments do work. Like we've had some stuff sort of telling us, be careful of this, be careful of that, watch your back. But it is like the best way for health going forward.
That's one day, and you've already picked that up after one day. It's huge, right? There is overwhelming evidence. It is the best profession. It is what we need. Do you feel more confident at the end of today than you did before walking in this morning?
Definitely.
It's huge, right? So the reason we push this podcast out too is to help more students. I speak to students every month, and I'm like, you have to listen to this podcast. It will save your soul. Right? Start at number 1. We're up to number 9 at the time of this filming. Like, go through them, but you're probably going to need to listen multiple times. And then I'll throw the second half of this to you, buddy.
I'm probably a little less charitable about the schools, to be honest. I believe they have a moral obligation to share the evidence with students that I share with you today. It's all published. It's all available. There's no reason why they can't go over it with you. And now, of course, you can only teach what you know. So I understand. They're not dragging the most successful chiropractors out of practice to teach at school. That's just a reality. And I also very highly agree with Brad that you're in school to become a doctor or a clinician, meaning that you are a mature student who is responsible for what you learn. I'm all in that. Like I actually teach at the school in Barcelona online, like through that's the first thing I say to them is like, and what I said to the group this morning, like, you're responsible for what you get, but you're also paying a lot of money, and therefore they're responsible for what they give and provide. And I don't think they do a good job. I'll be honest. I honestly think they do a very poor job on giving you the confidence. They're never going to make you a great business person. They don't have time to teach the stuff Brad teaches about, how to run an office, but they do have time, and they do have a moral obligation to teach you the evidence about, why it's okay to recommend chiropractic care. And so I think if people in the audience I think you'd probably agree, is that one thing that you don't leave with from chiropractic college for the most part is an overwhelming amount of evidence about how great you are. And that to me is a tragedy, because medical doctors don't leave medical school going, I suck and I'm dangerous. Dentists don't leave dental school going, I suck and I'm dangerous. Physical therapists don't leave physical therapy school saying, I suck and I'm dangerous. And yet chiropractors, look what happens. And you're paying an awful lot of money, especially in the U.S. And I just think that they should be held to a higher standard. I truly believe that.
That I totally agree with. And at the same time, I used to complain about what they were doing and how much more they could be doing. And then I just thought, fuck it, just get to a workshop. Let's do this. Let's put up our sleeves and get to work. Because it was like, well, there's the system and there's the administration. You need to sit down with so-and-so. And it was like, you know what, instead of going through all that, just grab a seat in the seminar. We'll just fire hose the information so that you at least get it, or you've been exposed to it, or you have it. Because
100%.
The truth is, if you're waiting for the schools to come around, you'll be graduated by the time you figure that shit out. So you being here and your dad, bringing you along is honestly one of the best things you could do for your future. And then being in the right room, showing up is 90% of success, but showing up in the right room is 95% of success. So just, you being here and having your dad bring you, whether you came kicking and screaming or voluntarily, this is going to have a massive impact on your career. And sometimes you don't even know it, right? Like in the moment you're there, you don't even know this is the moment for you. But I remember Fred Barge pounding on a podium. I remember the first time I heard James speak. I remember listening to Patch in Tempo. I mean, the first time you have these breakthroughs, it's just like looking around the room going, why didn't we get this in school? And I'm of the opinion now, leave school, go somewhere else and just find it. Like, don't wait for it to come to you. Go get it. And I agree with everything you've said. Like, they should be doing more. I don't have the confidence that ship's going to turn around soon enough. It's not. The next best thing is we're going to provide the information for you, whether you're a doc or a student. And truth be told, we charge a significant amount less for this workshop for the students because we encourage you to do it. But what I won't do is do it for free, because I think people vote with their dollars, and if there's no value in it, then a lot of times you don't value the information. And so at the risk of, having people lump us into that category, I don't want to do free, because then there's no value, and they'll decide what they like. If it hurts a little bit, if it stings a little bit, then you take it a little bit more seriously. And so that's where the investment comes in. It's your time and your treasures to really open up the information. And how you opened it this morning was unique, and I thought that was really good. You just cracked everybody open first thing this morning. That was huge.
Yeah, and I mean, I can tell you, I've taught probably thousands maybe now of chiropractic students. Some of them, while they're in school, and many of them when they're fresh out because they're struggling.
Yeah.
And whether you realize it or not, like you're going to be hitting the road running much better if you just all students really need to hear the information we're sharing. I truly believe that. And most of you would probably, in the audience who are doctors, would probably say the first thing you say is, I wish I knew this earlier.
Yeah.
I get that a lot. I just wish I knew that earlier. And I'm like, yeah, I hear you.
So Chris's dad actually came out to Seal Beach to see my practice, stayed for 4 days. We do something twice a year. We call it Fight Club. And we have docs come into the office. I blew out a wall. I put in a one-way mirror. It's total transparency. I wear a microphone. I see my patients. Everything I do for 4 days, they're allowed to watch it. And in an already great practice, and your mom runs the show, your dad just kind of gets dragged along, like most offices, right? And what's cool about it is actually they went to that next level, because you can see it, you can repeat it. And that's going to be a theme, I think, that plays over for successful practices. Like, you just hit that next level, and then you hit that next level. And the minute you think you're done growing, you're dying. So to me, it's like there's always another level to get to. And what's really cool is your dad pursues it, which is going to make it easy for you to pursue it. Because you don't need to listen to your dad. You just need to watch your dad.
Yeah.
And that's a man of character and quality. And so I have great respect for your family and your father in particular for what he's doing. So
Thank you.
Cheers, brother. Welcome to the ranks. It's good to
Cheers.
have you here with us.
Yeah, cheers.
Right on. Let's hear it for Chris. Yeah. All right. Javier from Spain. Come on up to the mic. Give Javier a round of applause. Well done. Before you get started, I just want to say thanks for not having big arms. I didn't mean that as like to put you down or anything, but you're not big. So, all right, go ahead.
We have been through the whole theory and all the studies that you teach us today. But can you tell us, like in a practical way, how to explain the benefits of chiropractic to our patients so they keep get adjusting forever or the whole life?
I've always felt that Hilton's Law, or just teaching people the importance of movement and what that does. I didn't get a lot into it today. I'll do it more tomorrow. But once people understand the importance of motion, not just in terms of their spinal health and their neuromusculoskeletal health, but in terms of their emotional health, their gut health, their inflammatory levels, their overall well-being, I think it becomes self-evident. So what I always say is there are certain things that people have to know to choose chiropractic care for at all or believe, and there's certain things they have to know or believe to continue with chiropractic care for life. And so one of the things they have to know is that motion is life. That without motion, they're dying, they're degenerating, and if their body's degenerating, their mind's degenerating, and their gut's degenerating. And if that's the case, they really have no hope for a long, healthy life. And so I just tie it all together for them in that way. And I always start with the importance of motion, because I think, and again, I'll talk about this tomorrow, but one of the things about that when people go to that novel stimulus, one of the things that people know when they go to a chiropractor is they got moved. They experience and feel that they got moved, and that's unique. They don't feel that anywhere else. There's nothing in healthcare like the feeling or the sound or the experience of a chiropractic adjustment. And whether or not they understand about the neurology or any of the other things you want to talk about, what they know for sure is they moved. And everybody knows that moving and being comfortable makes a better life. Everybody knows that, especially as you get older.
Yeah.
So that's how I do it.
Yeah, when we were down in New Zealand College of Chiropractic in what I call the subluxation lab, and there's now 38 researchers down there. One of the cool things is James has mentioned in previous podcasts, movement is neurology, and I think that's huge. But they've got 38 researchers doing studies on all different kinds and varieties. And what's super important is if there's a lack of motion, people start to age immediately. And I think it's Andy Galpin, it's an exercise physiologist, world renowned, said if someone's immobilized for 10 days or they're on 10 days of bed rest, and obviously they're getting up and using the restroom and those kinds of things, but still immobilized more or less for 10 days, they age on average physiologically over 10 years. Movement's super important. James has a phrase where you got to do full range of motion through every joint in the body against
Resistance.
every day.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just huge. And one of the things they said, one of the biggest biomarkers, the number one biomarker for longevity is ambulation and mobility.
100%.
As people get older, how much can they move? How active are they? And that's a direct correlation to mortality rates. It's an inverse rule. So the more mobile you are, the longer you're going to live, the less mobile, the shorter the life expectancy. And we all know the statistics on, females falling and fracturing the hip. And I think it's over the age of 65, the mortality rate's less than a year after a femoral head fracture. Over the age of 65, it's huge. Life just isn't the same. So understanding that they need to move for life means they can't have restrictions for life, which means they need chiropractic care for life. And to me, less words is better. Right? Shorter sound bites is better. So you need to move for life, which means you can't have restrictions for life, which means you'll need to be adjusted for life. What I always leave blank is the frequency. I go, and how much we need to do that? We'll just see. But the fact is you need to be adjusted. Does that make sense? So start with a known, does that make sense to you? Like that you're actually going to, you need to be adjusted. And as I'm talking to Javier, I'm nodding my head right now. So if you're listening and what is he doing, audience? What's he doing as I do this? He's nodding in agreement too. So with my patients, I do this. I go, so you understand you need to be adjusted. Like this isn't the last one for life. Okay, cool. So we've established that. You need some care. How much care? Frequency of care. And sometimes as you get older, you might need more. Just makes sense, right? So to me, it's a building process. It's never like I did this one thing and now they're good for life. You're never done, right? It's a process always, and you need reminders always. And so just be committed to that process, which is why I think many chiropractors need to shorten their adjusting hours. Like there's too long of days and it's hard to stay focused. Shorten up your time frame, be laser focused, and actually you can stay on point easier through the day. It's the long drawn out days with big gaps in between. Chiropractors lose their focus and they just start talking about superfluous stuff. So to me, it's about just carving away the nonsense in the practice and just focusing on what's important. Michelangelo said, when he carved David, he just said, I just cut away what was superfluous and this is what was left. In other words, it was already in there. I just need to cut out, and that's what we need to do in practice. We just need to cut out the other stuff that doesn't serve us and just focus on the masterpiece. The masterpiece is patience, duration practice for life. That to me is it. And that's just layered and consistency and just being disciplined. And it just starts with, I'm not going to talk about anything else during adjusting hours other than chiropractic. So if you have a 9-hour day, that seems like a lot. If you have a 3-hour adjusting shift, it's totally doable. Make sense? Cool. Anything else with that, buddy? No, that's okay. Javier, how long have you been in practice?
I graduated in 2008, so it's 17 years, no?
17 years, and you're still learning.
Yeah.
I've seen you at many seminars. This dude's a legend. If you wouldn't mind, put your hands together for Javier. Thanks for coming. By popular demand, we have opened up an online Level Up Academy. Docs, if you're interested in revolutionizing your practice, making a shift towards more wellness patients who stay on for chiropractic care even when their pain is gone, then you need to join us for our Level Up Online Academy. This is something new that we're doing in 2025. By popular demand, our doctors that couldn't wait to workshops, didn't have the timing on the calendar to wait 6 months to get in to get the materials, we're making this available in 2 formats. You see, our Level Up Academy is where I run small groups. We also have coaching calls where docs do the work and increase specifically their wellness conversions. Now, we have the best day 1, day 2 at our Elements of Closing workshop. However, the conversion, once they complete a corrective plan, the conversion into wellness care is really where we shine. So if you want more information, message us. We can do a discovery call and see if this is a good fit for you. But if you're interested in moving your patients more towards vitalism, keeping patients who don't have pain in an asymptomatic model, a salutogenic model, then message us for the Level Up Online Academy. I'll be your coach. LevelUpMentoring.rocks is where you can send your queries. All right, Vignir. Vignir practices in Iceland. Put your hands together for Vig.
You both riled up?
Yeah.
Good. How you guys doing?
Good, doing good.
All right, how do you want to start this?
With an arm wrestle.
Yeah, well, I'm not the guy, so yeah, I won't do that.
Your question, anything goes.
All right, so we all want to get patients better and get like great results, but what do you feel like most docs are missing out on doing and that we should do better? In other words, like as a profession, where are we lacking? Where could we get better to have a bigger impact on our communities?
Well, I think most chiropractors are underserved in terms of not only the number of people, but especially in the amount of care they give. And I don't think people, if you're underserving, you're not giving chiropractic a chance to prove itself. So I think that's probably the biggest issue. And again, why I think it's lack of confidence and knowledge and all the things we talked about. But I would say for me, if you don't understand that chiropractic is a lifestyle, it's a different way of living. It's not just a different healthcare paradigm, it's a different life paradigm. And if you're living that yourself, and if you're practicing that, and if you're sharing that with your patients and they understand that, I think that you have a chance to do much greater good if you see a bigger picture of a lifestyle. And so the way you live your life, you talk to people at a chiropractic center, and they always want to tell you, oh, my kids are pure, man, they're not vax, we eat good food, some do, some don't, whatever. But it's like you can tell that when they get it, they're like their whole lives are different than the average human being. We're outliers. And we're outliers of healthy. So what I would say to you is that you want to start with, if you're the healthiest person in your community or one of them, it's likely that you're going to be doing and sharing that with your patients, and they're going to be much healthier.
Yeah.
So I would say it starts with self. Be the healthy person, be the role model, have your staff understand it the same way, and then the chances are your patients are going to get that level of benefit as well, because you don't just get adjusted even as a chiropractor. You live your life differently. So if we took people, if we did a study and we said, okay, we're just going to take people who live kind of an allopathic lifestyle, but we're going to adjust them once a week for life. And we took some people who live the chiropractic lifestyle, who understand all the things that we talk about, like, the eat well and the move well and the think well, and, like staying away from the drugs and all the things that we talk about. And adjust those people. The people who live the chiropractic lifestyle will do much, much, much better than the people who just got adjusted. And I think that's something to keep in mind.
Well, one thing you said, like, it's like that certainty that I feel like sometimes, even myself, like, it's like we have to be very certain with what we're communicating to, like, the community to get better results.
Agreed. Yeah. Because without that certainty, it's very hard to make the recommendations they need, I think.
Exactly.
Because generally the patients want to get as little care as possible. That makes sense to me. They probably want to spend as little money as possible. They want to get the most benefit for the least cost.
Yeah.
But we have to work with physiology and biology. So what we can do is we can say we can maximize your benefits, right?
Yeah.
And we'll give you the least possible amount of care, but below a certain amount, you're not going to get the benefits. So it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I would say too, kind of on that theme of keeping people around the chiropractic conversation, keeping them in a care plan, honoring the principle number 6 of time. It's going to take some time and repetition. I always tell my team, and we just did this at the start of the year, hey, there's going to be people that say no to our recommendations. Let's just get that out of the way. There's going to be people that complete their corrective care, their initial care, and they're not going to move on to their wellness phase. It's going to happen sometime this year. So let's just get across the point. We're not going to be perfect. We're not going to be undefeated. It's going to happen. And what that allows us to do as a team, and this is great for the listeners, high intentions, low attachment. I want the best. I'm going to tell them in the best way possible, use the best communication, share the experiences, involve them in the process as much as possible. And if I work and communicate at the highest level, and that's also what I teach chiropractors, then if they say no, I can be out. High intentions, low attachment means if they say no, all right, I've done everything I can, everything in my control I've done. And if they say no, I just got to walk away. I'm not going to kick the dog, go home and be mean to my kids and have a spat with my spouse because somebody said no to my recommendations on Friday. And while that might seem funny, I've seen this happen for years with chiropractors. How they ended their week is what dictates their weekend with their family, and they go and pick it up Monday. It's not worth it. High intentions, low attachment will save you so much frustration. I want the best for you, but if you don't want this, I can't want this more than you. I think you said that today when you were teaching. Like, you can't want it more than them. If they say no, I'm out too. All good. And the truth is, I think that's a secret to happiness and success. And we can have both. It's an and conversation. You could be successful and have fulfillment. Sometimes in chiropractic, we're taught it's either or. You can be successful, make a lot of money, but low fulfillment. Or you can have fulfillment, but you're broke as a joke. Wrong answer. You can have both success and fulfillment. You can have the numbers and the joy in the process, but part of it is having the boundary, and that's a big word, to just go, I'm unattached. If you say no, I can't care more than you, that's it. It's like going to the gym. I can't do the exercises for you. You got to do this. You got to want it. And if you don't, that's okay too. And that's a discipline I had to work on because I wasn't always there. And there was times it would be in the back of my head over the weekend, or I'd be distant and my wife would be talking to me and I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. I was thinking about the patient from yesterday, living life in the rearview mirror. I don't do that anymore. Like, you make your best recommendations. It's a mic drop and do whatever you want. And in that sense, I'm completely unattached to what they do. And if they want it, I want it. But outside of that, you can kind of just let it go.
Yeah. Gosh, I
So
think we've all
Vig
been
actually
there.
came out. He's one of the docs that's come out to my practice and been there for 4 days. He practices in Iceland. What would you say? What would be a takeaway? What would be a thing you saw in my practice as far as like executing on what James and I talk about? What would be a takeaway or a share that you'd want other chiropractors to know that maybe they could use in their practice?
You're spinning this on me.
Yeah, I know.
A
See how
loaded
that
question
works?
back.
When you sat down and you were like, all right, let's see how this goes. I'm like, yeah, real funny. Let's see if we can flip this around.
I didn't know how you wanted to start, but yeah.
Not like that, but keep going.
So being out to the practice, one of the biggest things is like hearing how you communicated, like with every patient, something on, every adjustment about chiropractic, related it to the adjustment and their care plan, and how it is a process. But then also, there was like mind shift in like how fluent everything was, or like how smooth everything goes, right? And how everybody knew their role. So it's like a well-oiled machine of how the patients and team members went around, and even like the patients just knew what was going on with their adjustments and just laying on the table and getting ready. Yeah. But most importantly, it was like the table talk that I took away from it, like how calm and slowly you moved was something that I've implemented, and it's like, it's true. It feels like you slowed down time.
What kind of music did we play when it was slow and mellow? What kind of music was on?
AC/DC.
I play AC/DC
Rock and
in
roll.
practice. Yeah. If I do it right, people are there for 2 songs. And that's exactly what I tell them. They go, is this AC/DC? I go, yeah. They go, it's kind of hardcore for an office. I go, you'll be here for 2 songs. Don't worry. I'm here all day. I'm here all day. I got to like the music. And part of what we did, and we have a video on this. It's on our YouTube channel. I think it's Level Up Mentoring on YouTube. But it was a video of a woman who came in when you were there, and she had a really bad migraine. And rarely do they talk about symptoms. And I just said, okay, let's check your atlas. And sure enough, she was subluxated. And I just said, hey, we're going to adjust you here, and it's going to help you. But the phrase was, to what degree?
We'll have to see.
To what degree, we'll have to see. And so after I did it, and docs go, that was amazing. I go, what did I say? It's just kind of like, I don't really know what it was. To what degree, we'll see. And so it's an open-ended thing. I don't make promises. I definitely don't give timelines. And I've seen chiropractors do this. You should be better by Friday. Why would you do that? You don't put time on their pain or symptoms. But what we do, and the reason the office is fluid, is agreements and expectations. When somebody signs up to a care plan, we have a process that I teach chiropractors, have the agreements and expectations so they know their role, they know my role. And I always tell them it's a 50-50 process, right? I'll do my part, you got to do your part. And the truth is, include them, because that R word is big. It's the responsibility. Your health is your responsibility. I'm on your health team, but you got to do your part. And so that's how they know their role. That's how the office is fluid. I can be mellow. And if it gets busy in there, I actually go slower, so it's more intentional. It is quiet, the lights are dim, and we crank AC/DC. And to me, it's like, if I do this right, you're going to be here for a couple songs. I'm here all day. We had one lady come in, she was like, this is really dark music. I go, yeah, it's called Black Sabbath. She goes, that's really dark. I said, the guy next to you is Bill Ward. He's the drummer for Black Sabbath. Oh, is he single? I was like, you filthy animal. So practice is fun, but the truth is, it doesn't have to be this frenetic thing when you're doing a volume or you're seeing people. Actually slow it down, right? Get more intentional. So Vigner's building some big things in Iceland. I know you got a lot of chiropractors that are coming up there, a couple out of LifeU that we talked to, and they're loving the experience. So if you guys wouldn't mind, give this dude a round of applause. You'll see him in the future. Okay, Christopher from the Netherlands. Christopher. All right, put your hands together for Christopher. Nice work. In the interest of time, we'll take a couple more questions if that's cool. If this is a bad question, this will be the last one.
No pressure. It might be easy though. So first one out of the gate, this kind of goes back for Dr. Chestnut, but the CCWP, is that kind of coming back on board anytime soon, or what do you think there?
Probably online, for a couple of reasons. I don't really want to travel around that much, and most people now don't really want to travel 4 times and bring their staff and stuff. So I think it's just going to be better to go online. So yeah, we're talking about that right now, as a matter of fact.
Okay, wonderful.
Before we go any further, can you just explain for the people that don't know what CCWP is and just give a little bit of a plug for why you think it should come back? This is a shameless plug, and definitely promote it.
For sure. CCWP is the Certified Chiropractic Wellness Practitioner, which I did all 4 modules. I didn't quite finish the testing until COVID hit, and that's kind of messed all that up. But essentially, I found it valuable in putting you in the authority mode in your public community. Right. So that way you can say all this stuff, talk to people about it with the certainty that says, hey, we're the best suited for this. Right.
Yeah. So it basically was through the ICA. So it was actually, you get a certification, and it was 4 modules and 4 12-hour weekends in person. Then you had 4 12-hour home modules, and then you had a final exam. So it was basically a 100-hour program. And it was, the first 12 hours was all chiropractic, and then it was a nutrition 12 hours. It was an exercise and movement tied to chiropractic 12 hours, and then it was a think well. So it was eat well, move well, think well, chiropractic, basically. So I'll get back to it, but yeah, it's travel, right?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And he's put the miles on. Honestly, to get him here to London was no small feat, and it's one of those things he wants to teach and share with chiropractors, but the trips are long, and the dude did miles for years. I mean, a couple decades. I mean, long haul flights, Australia for the weekend, over to Europe the following weekend. And if you've ever done stuff like that, it is a brain scramble. And it wasn't because he needed it financially. He did it because he felt like the chiropractors needed it. So intentionality and doing it for the right reasons. The guy is all about integrity and everything he does. So for sure, he's going into the Chiropractic Hall of Fame without a doubt.
The second one was, we kind of touched on it with mobilization versus manipulation, but kind of myofascial release and their kind of aim and statements about soft tissue, adhesion reduction, range of motion. How would we kind of pit that manipulation versus that, and where the benefits are for one versus the other?
Sure. So they have no evidence for back problems, like for spinal issues. It's not to say there's no benefit to it. I only look at the evidence as it pertains to basically spinal health things. So if there can be adhesions in the soft tissue, there's no doubt about it. Whether or not there's good evidence that you can break those up or not, I'm not sure. Not that I've seen, but it doesn't mean to say it doesn't work. And so if clinically you think that works, as long as you're not replacing the adjustment, my view is this. And as I said, the adjustments in the center, it gets through that evidence-based filter to get into the central target. So that plus, the essential nutrients, omega-3, D, probiotic, and home exercise, right? Like those things should be a part of everybody's regime. Whether or not you do it in your office or you just tell them to go out and do it, it doesn't matter. Those things are so evidence-based and they're so clear that they're beneficial and worth the investment from the patient that they get through that filter. Now, the rest of the stuff is going to be clinical experience. You might find, hey, I think, this particular person could benefit from that soft tissue stuff or whatever. Now, whether you want to do it or not in your office or refer out for it, that's up to you. I will just tell you, there is nothing more lucrative than an adjustment because the time involved. And so, it's if you're spending, like 5 minutes is a long time to be with a patient, right? And if you're above 5 minutes, you're going broke. That's just reality. And so, and I don't know how you could spend more than 5 minutes unless you're yakking, and so if you watch people like Brad, or I've watched some very high volume practitioners, and it's slow. It's like, like the great athletes say, oh, just slow down. I could see the ball. I could see the defense or whatever. And so it's like when these people get in the zone, no one's rushed. and they get an adjustment. And the thing is, after the adjustment, what else can you give them of value? Well, whatever that is that you're going to say it, your staff can say it, a handout can say it. There's a lot of other ways to do it, but you work by the hour. So you need to get paid well by the hour. So I would just, and if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. Do it. Floats your boat in practice for sure. But I would just say, in terms of the evidence of getting better from the classic spinal health issues that we deal with, there's not a lot of evidence for it. But if you're seeing results in your office, awesome. That's how I would address that.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is that, simple things like starting patients face down will quiet your adjusting area if you have an open adjusting room. If they're in a private room, it's even more important to start people face down. You just don't want them emptying out their pockets and just certain things. So a good takeaway from this and a good step one is the first part of your adjustment, you need to lay down and relax. Mm-hmm. That's step one. And if I go into a room or open adjusting and they're not I go, oh, you didn't do step one. You need to relax. Lay down. Like, I just won't even check them. Oh, you're not ready. Go face down. And it's just really slow and intentional. But coming to that point of slow motion, it's like when we get busier and the office might get louder, I go slower and I actually lower my voice. And I know I yell at seminars, but people find it amazing when they see me in practice how quiet I am.
Same.
And I whisper and it's low tone. It's because it brings the energy down for them. So it's not frenetic. I don't want them picking up on what's going on around them. I want them to know I'm right here, right now. And in that moment of the adjustment, they might think it was a 15-minute process and it was a minute or two. And I think BJ said, if it takes you more than a minute, you're stealing time from the patient. Whatever the time frame is for you, the truth is there is that point at which you're just doing extra stuff. It's not helping the patient. And I always say, you're not going to talk them back to health. You're going to adjust them back to health.
Yeah, and it becomes a justification, right? Because you think more time is more valuable. It's not.
Mm-mm.
And what I always say to people is, how long should it take, especially students, right? Or when you first get in, I say, take your best friend, right? Have them face down on the table when you walk in the room, and adjust them and see how long it takes, or your wife, whatever. And guess what? It'll be
no more than 2 minutes, probably.
Probably, right? And so it's like, so what are you? The rest of it is you saying somehow the value's in time. Value's not in time. Value's in the adjustment.
And I'll go a step further and say most people will pay for speed. They'll pay extra for speed. Like if you go to the airport and they go, oh, you pay, 20 pounds or 20 euros or $20 to go in the fast lane or the fast track. Most people, executives, high performing people will pay the extra money to get through because time is actually the most precious commodity. At some point in everybody's career, it isn't money, it's actually time. You can always make more money, you can't get more time. And at some point that flips for everybody. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I just assume most of my patients don't have time to waste. They would pay extra for speed, and they certainly wouldn't want me to spend extra time because they have stuff to do. And so come from that place of realizing everything is a right now world. Everything is instant gratification, scrolling through the dopamine hits on your phone. Like we've been programmed shorter and shorter time frames. That works great for the chiropractor. Shorten up your visits. That's what people want. So this isn't me taking away from the adjustment. It's actually what the patients want, and I do what I need. And so adjusting in that time frame, less is more. And please understand, your patients want speed. They don't want a picnic in your office for 2 hours. They have stuff to do outside of chiropractic.
Right. And if they feel, or you feel, either you or your patient feels that more time is required, neither of you value the adjustment or understand it. That's just fact. I mean, no one says, as we say, drill my tooth longer. Could you leave the needle in my arm longer when you're giving me whatever? Like, and so, how long does it take to swallow a pill, which they do? It's like if they're thinking that it's time, it means they don't understand what you're doing.
Yeah. And I had a dentist explain it. He goes, look, if you want me to get paid for time, I can pull that tooth slowly. Or would you want me to do it quickly? And I was point well taken. I love dentistry for analogies with chiropractic.
Yeah, it's very
because
good.
It just makes sense. You want to slowly twist and pull that thing out, or do you want me just to be done with it? It's the same idea. It's like, all right, cool. Point well taken, right?
Cool.
That was Chris from the Netherlands.
Thanks,
Put your hands
gentlemen.
together.
Thank you.
Hey chiropractors, thanks again for joining us for another important episode of the Chiro Factor. If you want to learn to do health talks and increase the numbers of new patients through your close, then you can join us for the Speak to Attract Believers workshop. Skeptics suck. So if you want new patients that are pre-educated, pre-qualified, learn the art of the close and getting more people in from your talks so you have a greater conversion of new patients at the end of your talk. Again, that's a hybrid course. It's online and there's a workshop. If you want to increase your day 1, day 2 conversions, in other words, have a higher percentage at your report of findings, that workshop is called The Elements of Closing. The Elements of Closing was voted the best day 1 report of findings in the profession. And a salutogenic model, very vitalistic. There's aspects of this you can delegate to your team, and your CAs can help in the process so we can increase your volume, decrease your workload. If you want to increase your profitability, then you need to get to the Elements of Closing workshop, because that ultimately sets you up for the greatest amount of wellness conversions. So the third thing to keep in mind is our Level Up Academy. It's new as of 2025. Small group learning with information and coaching by Glow, and also the emphasis on increasing your asymptomatic patients, increasing the people who stay with you after the pain is gone, they don't disappear. So if you want a salutogenic model, truly a vitalistic practice, and to increase your wellness conversions, then send us a message about our Level Up Academy. Speak to Attract Believers is making you a better speaker for new patients. Elements of Closing is for the report of findings and initial care plans. And our Level Up Academy really is the overall coaching program with the most amount of input, touch points, small group learning, materials to revolutionize your practice in 2025. Cheers, and thanks again for listening to the Chiro Factor. We know there's many factors in health, but let's face it, the X factor, the most unknown factor, and the thing that can make the biggest impact for your patients is the Chiro Factor. Hey, thanks again. We hope to see you soon. All this information can be found at levelupmentoring.rocks. Remember, it's not a .com. Levelupmentoring.rocks. Benjamin Martin, please come to the mic. Where's Roberta? She made me swear I wouldn't call her name, so I'm going to call it like 18 times just to put her on the spot. Benjamin. Oh, good man. Put your hands together for Ben. Ben Martin. Ben practices in Ireland. What do you have for us today?
So what is some of the latest research that's going on at the moment within chiropractic, obviously? And are there any gaps in the research that we should be looking at, or you'd love to see us looking at?
Brad is probably better to speak on what's going on in the research right now, since you're hanging out in the colleges more than me. I really kind of see what gets published. So it's usually several years before something's published as it's going on. So I don't want to pretend I know more than that or have my finger on the pulse of that more than I do. I can tell you what's going on in the Australian Spinal Health or the Australian Spinal Research Foundation, because I work on the clinical advisory panel for them, or volunteer.work. So yeah, there's some pretty neat stuff going on. The gap, I'll tell you my wish list for chiropractic. I've been asking for this, and I've visited most presidents back in the day when I was out, and really volunteered to help them design the study and even help them collect the data on it, because I have some ability to do that. Which is we need a long-term study, not a life study, but we need a 5-year study. Mm-hmm. And we need a 5-year study comparing chiropractic to a usual medical care control group. And even 10-year would be better. It wouldn't be that expensive, really, just depending, because we could get the chiropractors to volunteer. And I've always said, I guarantee I can get chiropractors to volunteer, and I can collect the data for them, mm-hmm. right? And so I have the ability to do that because I've developed a program to do that. And so I think that's what we really need. Like, we want to once and for all, like Heidi just published today, which I'll talk about tomorrow, which was really kind of interesting, looking at changes in 4 weeks in brain, changes in depression and anxiety, brain function, basically. It's really actually probably a really interesting direction and a study. And of course, longer term would be more interesting. But I really think, if we really want to talk about the things that we talk about in terms of wellness care and stuff, a 5-year study or a 10-year study would be great. And I'm pretty sure we could get people in here to volunteer and say, I'll adjust people for free if I have to, to be in a study. And I think, for whatever reason, like even for in the the stuff I do with the clinical advisory panel, like I scream all the time, stop measuring the effects of an adjustment.
Yeah.
like measure the effects of chiropractic adjustment care, a care plan, as Brad would say at the plan. Because I always use the analogy of exercise. Like, I'm an exercise physiologist. So if you looked at the effects of exercise, the first thing you would say is never do that. It's terrible. Your cortisol levels go up, your muscles break down, you create an inflammatory response. It's absolutely a disaster. And that's a little bit true of a single adjustment. Now, it depends what you're measuring. How do you only measure the neurology, the proprioception going into the sensory motor cortex? That's pretty positive. But there's a lot of things that go on an adjustment that you could be considered negative one time.
Right.
So there's a huge difference between looking at the effect of an adjustment and the effects of chiropractic care or chiropractic adjustments over time. So I would really love to see those studies done. And I think it's very feasible. I know we could get the chiropractors, because chiropractors are great. They would volunteer to do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's an easy one to do, and I think we could do it. It wouldn't be the be all to end all, but it would give us some data that would be much needed. Because I think if you ask chiropractors what they would really like, they would like some long-term data.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would just add to that. I'm not criticizing any of the researchers. The ones that are doing the work are overwhelmed, and they're doing a great job. And,
Agreed.
and even Heidi kind of mentoring and fostering this with other researchers, and what they're doing at NZ and what they're doing with the researchers. Like, it's a really cool. The research community in chiropractic is cohesive. I would say there's some really good people working together. So I'm not criticizing that.
Agreed.
However, we need funding. And that's a big part of it too, is like, where are we raising the money to do these studies? And, what isn't expensive for a 5-year study might be $100,000. And for a lot of chiropractors, it's like, geez, what does that do? Well, we need to start breaching those grounds. And I 100% agree with you on this. Let's not do one single adjustment studies, because then the implication or the deduction is, well, then I just need an adjustment. And so I post memes I'm on Dr. Glow DC for Instagram, and I post memes that chiropractors can use or teach. I shared the one today with the C5, C6 subluxation, proprioception. Who liked that study? Raise your hand if you like that. So that's an ASRF study. So if you don't know, that's the board James is talking about. That was funded by them. That was like an $80,000 study. It takes some money to get these things done. However, if we get the research and we can start doing that on a longitudinal basis, that's huge. Now, I don't know much about performing the studies or doing it, but I do like to fund them. So I can tell you, in the last 6 months, I've written a check to ACC, Australian Chiropractic College, because they're going to start doing some. NZ for their program, because they have 38 researchers now. Some of them aren't even chiropractors. They're doing vitalistic, really cool stuff. Ross McDonald with Scotland College, even though it's in its infancy, he's already brought Alice Cade over to do some of her research. And then Deed Harrison. So I wrote checks for $5,000 to those 4 places in the last 6 months. So $20,000 US. Not for the publicity and not for that, but just because that's an arena I think we need too, and I'm not the person to do it. So if I can't give my time or volunteer to do that with the care, I can certainly write a check. Deed Harrison doing, I'm going to bastardize it and say biomechanics, and he's published over 350 papers. Heidi doing things basically above the atlas. I'm generalizing. She does more than that, but just kind of like, if we were to put him in these categories, Alice Cade's doing some really cool stuff with concussion. We do that with our athletes. And just kind of looking at what they're going to be putting out there. They need funding, they need support, and that comes in many different ways. But the answer, I think, is just having that consistently on the radar. And what I think chiropractors need to know is, we were allowed to practice in certain countries, and in the US, 48 of 50 states, not even all of them, but most of them. And we were determined to be essential through COVID, not because of our vitalistic philosophy and not because of our vitalistic science. We don't have enough, they need more funding. We were allowed to be practicing and determined to be essential for neck and back pain. So if you are a salutogenic, vitalistic chiropractor and you work in that paradigm, that wasn't the reason we were allowed to be open. It was because we alleviated an undue stress on the hospitals and medical system for people that would go in for neck and back pain and probably wind up on opioids. So they allowed us to be open for biomechanical reasons, right? So it was basically for mechanical reasons. And so if we want to shift that paradigm and that definition, then we've got to come up with more studies and research. I'm not the person to spearhead that, but I do want to bring it up. So if ASRF is there and they're asking for money, if the NZ college is looking for it, Ross McDonald trying to do things here in the UK for all the right reasons for the last 20 years, the guy's given himself 100% to it, then we need to get behind it, whether that's $100 a month or $1,000 one-time donation. whatever you want to do. But yeah, I wrote checks for 20 grand in the last 6 months just because I feel like it's the right thing. And I know these people and they're really good people. Alice, Heidi, Deed. There's a short list of really, really good researchers that are phenomenal people. And what's really cool is that they're now fostering that for other researchers. So whatever that means to you as a listener, I would say get involved, check it out. I can't believe, James, how many audiences I speak to that don't know what ASRF is. They've never heard of Australian Spinal Research Foundation. And yet that's where majority of the studies, I think, that of the variety we talk about are coming from. And that's probably a good place to do a study like this. No coincidence you're on that board.
The problem we have is that most of because we have such a small community, they're kind of niche researchers, right? Yeah. And so they have their areas of interest, and that's how research works. That's great. There are some large amounts of funding available through NIH and these other things, but what you really need is we need a clinical researcher who's not a back pain person. And so it seems to me like the basically the neurophysiological stuff, kind of the subluxation side dominates, and the clinical side, kind of the back pain, neck pain people dominate. And what we need is we need a kind of a subluxation, more holistic sort of health benefit type in the clinical side of things, because clinical studies are very different than basic science studies. But basic science studies can't be extrapolated validly to clinical practice, right? And so we really need someone on our side of the fence. And I think Heidi will probably bring some people along with that with some of her stuff. It's so good. Yeah. But we really need some clinical evidence experts to do the kind of studies that the practitioners want to see and can help them talk about what chiropractic can do in clinical practice.
Because the ASRF released some of those books a couple of years ago, didn't they?
Right, yeah.
Because we got 4 or 5 of them in the office. They're fantastic.
Case for Chiropractic. That's a great way to support it too. There's volume 1 and volume 2. I actually did a study in there with Misty, 3-time Olympic gold medalist on that study we shared today, C5, C6 subluxation, proprioception of the elbow. So if you have to choose between volume 1 and volume 2, go with volume 2. I'm in that one. That would be the better one. No, they're both really good, but when you buy it, the money goes to support the research. And I just want to give a quick shout out and a prop to Kelly Holt, president of New Zealand College of Chiropractic. He's loaned researchers to Scotland College of Chiropractic. He's loaned curriculum to ACC. He has in-house resident researchers. They're doing a really cool collaborative in a financial model to encourage more research. The guy's innovative, he's cutting edge. He doesn't require a lot of space, meaning he's not a big ego and show, but he's really just steady and supporting a lot of other places. So I just want to give some love to Kelly Holt and what he's been doing globally, because he's just a really cool, steady guy that's really helping other places support the research, pump out the information, and do the things that we need. And he's just doing it very selflessly and very openly, and I think that's commendable. So
I agree, and he's smart.
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's do this before Ben leaves the hot seat. Anybody dying to ask a question? Do we have any CAs in here that would love to ask a question? Roberta, you ready to ask your question? Anybody else? Yeah. Let's do it. All right, put your hands together for Ben Martin. Real quick before Ben goes. Don't go yet. So Ben's one of these selfless servants too. He's the vice president of the Irish Chiropractic Association, bringing over vitalistic speakers, mixing it up on a consistent basis. The guy gives his time on a regular basis to help other chiropractors. Booming practice in Cork. He has in-house things in his practice to help docs that are struggling. The guy's an absolute gem. I count him as a good friend. So if you wouldn't mind, give him a loud round of applause and some love. You're not a chiropractor, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, that's the curriculum for this next question.
So I'm not a chiropractor. I'm not a chiropractic student. I'm actually a practice manager.
Right on.
And my background is in sport, particularly here in the UK. It's called rugby league, more worldwide known as rugby, but slightly different. And I heard you touch.
You're talking to me like I ate paint chips as a child. I know what rugby is.
Well,
rugby league's different.
Like, exactly. A lot of people.
Head traumas? Do you guys ever have concussions?
Yes, that's what I want to touch on.
I can definitely tell. Now continue with your question, but let's speed this shit up.
Right? So to get to my point, obviously I'm out of the know-how and out of the loop on the research that you guys are all doing. So touching on the concussion aspect that you mentioned a moment ago, I was just wondering, is there any literature out there that supports chiropractic with the concussions in terms of getting better?
I'm going to throw that to you. Not that I'm aware of, as far as chiropractic.
There's definitely evidence that the neck's involved.
Yeah.
So, and we're good at the neck, and there's definitely evidence that omega-3 is really important. I know that's not particular chiropractic adjustment, but I have not seen a study that talks about the chiropractic adjustments in people who have like acute concussion syndrome or whatever. So I just, that doesn't mean there isn't any. I'm just not aware of it, but I definitely can tell you that there's good evidence to show the upper neck's involved.
Yeah.
And that'll make a big difference, obviously. Right?
And that's published in medical journals that upper cervical spine evaluations and examinations should be done on all concussed patients. And I know that for sure. We teach a protocol called concussion roulette. It's everything from marketing to patient care to wellness care, but also post-concussion protocols. It's all online. And within concussion roulette, I have James teach the nutritional aspect. There's a huge brain-to-gut connection. And if you have anybody who's post-concussion, if they eat a big meal and they've recently been concussed, they'll have that brain fog. The problem is that continues for years if it's not corrected. Clinically, my experience is if they don't get adjusted, it never fully clears up. What I see in my practice is when they do, that's the biggest turnaround. And I think the best example of that would be Jim McMahon was talking about it, American football player. We call that in other parts of the world football Americano. It's American football, but I'm just fucking with you. So the idea is he said, he had multiple concussions, and he said, I only felt like my brain got flushed the toilet after the chiropractor adjust my neck. And it's in a 30 for 30 by ESPN.
Very good.
And he said, only when I got adjusted did I then feel normal again, as he's wearing shades and a high profile guy that played for a Super Bowl championship team. That's what we call Grandmaster Finals for football. It's basically the Super Bowl. And so the idea is only after his adjustment did he feel like he had clarity. But the truth is there's a big connection with brain to gut. In embryology, that's one of the first things that forms is the brain to gut connection. If you want to heal the brain, a lot of times it's nutritionally through the gut and vice versa. People have gut issues. You got to start talking about what's going on with the brain health. And so you'll see these things kind of play off of each other. But I know there's 3 journal articles that we have in Concussion Roulette that talk about upper cervical exams being mandatory out of medical journals for every concussed patient. Now, they don't say what to do with it. They don't take that next step and say, this is what needs to be done. They just say it needs to be evaluated. And from an anatomical perspective, C1, C2, and C3 is still considered brainstem. So anything upper cervical basically is brain work. And if people have had concussions, I've seen this time and again. And I'll give you the short version. We had a pro baseball player that was a catcher and got run into multiple times and had concussions. And he came in and he just said, look, I'm contemplating suicide because I can't keep my thoughts straight. My wife and I want to start a family. I don't know if I'm fit to be a father because I have these tendencies. So I don't want to bring kids into the world when I want to jerk the wheel into a tree. Literally his words as I'm driving down the road, I want to smash my car sometimes because the pain, the head trauma, the leaky gut, all of it. And leaky gut forms within a couple hours of a head trauma. He just said, I don't know if I'm ready to start a family. And I said, well, I don't know if I'm good enough as a doctor to do this. Give me some time. I'll work with you. But if I get better, I can get you better. Can we do this journey together? And long story short, he's now a great friend. His wife is also a pro athlete. So perfect DNA, but they just didn't have the quality care. And needless to say, that the crowning moment for me and the moment that I was like, this is why I do what I do is he came in one day and he had tears in his eyes and he just said, I'm ready to be a dad. And I kind of went, what do you mean? He said, I'm clear. Like like what we've talked about, the work we've done in here in the chiropractic care is the only thing that got me through this. And he said, without you, what pro sports often do is they force every pro athlete to be their own pharmacist. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a really profound statement. Every pro athlete has to be a pro pharmacist or their own pharmacist unless they have a chiropractor. And I said, will you say that on camera? And he did. And it was just one of those things. He said, I'm ready to be a dad now. And I think that was a big bonding moment for us, which is why we're now personal friends, because it was just like, like I went from the dark side to the chiropractic side. And it was just one of those things that's like, is there evidence? Is there research? I don't know. Not that I'm aware of. Is there clinical information? Fuck yeah. I mean, like without a doubt, everybody who's concussed needs to see a chiropractor. And I'll give you one number metric here that will help everybody here and the people listening. A car crash, most car crashes happen anywhere from 4 to 10 G's of force. So you don't really need to know what a G force is, and neither will your patients. But they know what a car crash is. They know what whiplash is. Most whiplashes happen between 4 and 10 G's of force. All concussions happen over 90 G's of force. So even without knowing, if you give that pre-frame in the context, car crash, whiplash, car crash, all right, I've seen them. I've been in one. I get it. And then you say, but all concussions happen over 90 G's of force. Most patients go, whoa. Exactly. So anybody who's concussed needs a chiropractor because everybody concussed is subluxated. And so without giving you a hard time anymore, the truth is that's absolutely an arena I think chiropractors need to dominate. And that's a conversation I'm having with Alice Cade, because that's a passion of hers, concussion. So
they have done some pretty interesting work on stroke. So there is evidence to show that if you get in 4 weeks, if you do physiotherapy only versus physiotherapy plus chiropractic, or plus fake chiropractic, the one that got the real chiropractic care, they had significant improvement in brain function. And if you look at Heidi's work, her last one that she just did, she talks about how the adjustment actually helps integrate different areas of the brain to be more coordinated, which is really part of the concussion issue.
Yeah.
And so it's common.
Yeah.
But it makes total sense in the evidence-informed rather than evidence-based category to say, you should, if you're concussed, you should get adjusted. You definitely need a probiotic, and you definitely need to get on omega-3 and vitamin D. There's really good evidence that athletes who are on omega-3 and vitamin D before concussion heal faster, and they get less concussions. NFL study. Because concussion is brain inflammation. And you cannot resolve inflammation because you don't have your pro-resolving pathways. And vitamin D and omega-3 both get into the brain. You've got to have the omega-3 and vitamin D as well. Absolutely crucial.
And they did that autopsy with the NFL players. 110 of 111 players had CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, after multiple concussions. So they did autopsies on American football players, and 110 out of 111, 99% had permanent brain damage from the head traumas. Without question, they need chiropractic care. I'm seeing it clinically, and that's what I'm going to work with Alice Cade on. And just to kind of let the cat out of the bag, a little bit early, we're actually working on doing some MRI pre and post stuff. Good. So to be continued. But yeah, that's right in my wheelhouse. And I hate to talk about it until we've done it, but I'm on board with that because that's a major leverage point. And I think if you have pro athletes advocating, you don't need MD approval. Look at what the athletes do. The science and research is going to follow. You've already heard us talking about that. That's going to be a big tie-in, and that's kind of where we're going with it. So thanks for putting up with the abuse today. Totally appreciate it. And thanks for being good sports. Hey, you guys, thanks for coming. Thanks for sticking around. As always, James Chestnut brings the heat. So if you guys wouldn't mind, we're going to wrap up the show with a nice big round of applause. Let's get this on the mic. Loud as you've been all day. Let's hear it.
That's the Brad.
Thank you, guys. Again, thanks for your support and listening to this podcast, The Chiro Factor. Look, there's many factors in health, but the X factor is always the chiropractic factor, and we thank you for listening. If you wouldn't mind, do me a huge favor. And what I'm going to do is use your comments down below as ammunition and firepower to tell James Chestnut and to show James Chestnut we need to get back on the road. We need to go back to Australia, maybe in 2026. We need to get back over to Europe in 2026. And possibly set a North America date in 2025 because the seminar is just that good. So if you would, please drop some positivity down below. Give us some love. Give some comments to James in particular. And remember, there's many factors in health. And you, my friends, you're the X factor for a lot of people. You're the miracle they've been looking for. Get back into your office. Fire it up with your patients. Let's go save some lives. Until next time, cheers.